This is the Inspired Pilot Podcast, episode 28.
Is to trust yourself. If you feel something is amiss, you need to get yourself into a position where you can investigate it.
Welcome to the Inspired Pilot Podcast with your host, Marvin Robinson. Inspiring stories from inspiring pilots from around the world.
Okay, welcome to the Inspired Pilot Podcast. This is Marvin Robinson, and I'm very excited to introduce today's featured inspiring pilot, 𝗘𝗽𝗀. Welcome to the show, Jeff. Are you ready to inspire today?
Absolutely.
Fabulous. Okay, let's go. 𝗘𝗽𝗀's love of aviation has taken him on a journey well beyond the cockpit. Jeff is a pilot, an aircraft owner, an FAA-certified A&P mechanic and inspector, writer, and inventor. Jeff has spent the last 18 years promoting owner-assisted aircraft maintenance, holds several STCs for aircraft modifications, and recently certified the FlexAlert multifunction annunciator to increase flight safety. Driven by a mission to get people flying more, Jeff is also the creator of SocialFlight.com and the free SocialFlight mobile app, which maps over 20,000 aviation events, destinations, and $100 hamburgers to support the GA community in the US and beyond. Most recently, Jeff and his two teenage boys have begun building a Titan T-51 aircraft kit in the living room of their home. Okay, Jeff, I've given our listeners, the Inspired Pilots, a little overview of quite a lot of stuff there. Can you take a minute? Tell us a little bit about yourself personally, where you're from, and before we jump deeper, can you just give us a brief overview of what you're doing aviation-wise right now?
Well, as far as a brief intro, I didn't come from an aviation family and actually had pretty much no exposure or background to general aviation. So I grew up believing and kind of being told that this was the type of thing that maybe either you were going to be professional that you could do if you're going to be a professional pilot, or you had to be exceptionally wealthy, and this is just something to explore later in life. And as much as I loved model airplanes and had all the looking at the sky as probably every one of your listeners does, dreaming of flying, it took until well after college that I really met my first general aviation pilot. And that person gave me my first flight, gave me my introduction into that, and I found this incredibly welcoming community that really, to the name of your show, was incredibly inspiring. And I found that experience of not knowing about it and having these preconceived notions of what aviation was all about, and then being enlightened kind of a little bit later in life to it and being able to go off to the races really gave me a mission that I follow to this day, of trying to give back, trying to spread the word about it, and trying to help people believe that they can do just about anything that they want to do in aviation, or in my particular area in general aviation, regardless of their financial situation or their place in life or their age or anything like that. And so kind of overcoming hurdles became my kind of calling card, I guess, of making those things happen.
Fabulous. Well, it sounds like we're in for a good story here. I love the way you said, some keywords there, right? Inspiration, meeting that person that was the catalyst for your aviation career. And it sounds like you've taken an inspiration and you're moving forward into and inspiring others now. So I'm looking forward to getting into your journey. So let's jump back to that, after college stage where you first met that first GA pilot. So tell us how you first got involved with flying. Tell us that story.
So I got that first flight. So I live in New England, which is the northeastern portion of the United States, right in Massachusetts, which geographically is a very exciting area for aviation because you have Cape Cod, you have the islands of Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, you have the ski mountains and hiking areas. But all of these things are quite difficult and tedious to get to by driving. And yet, geographically, as the crow flies, they're incredibly close. And so that was my real first introduction to flying, was someone that I knew and was working with that, introduced me to that flying and said, we're going to Martha's Vineyard for dinner. And I'm thinking like, okay, so that's about a 10-hour trip or whatever.
Yeah.
You take the ferry or you do all these other things. And it really opened my eyes to that. And I found through talking with him and through talking with some other folks that, every pilot wants to make more pilots. It's a fascinating thing. And that was the case with these folks that I met. And so I had, at the time, I had recently ended a relationship, which meant that I had a little spare cash now.
And free time, yeah, excellent.
Exactly. And as expensive as I thought flying was, it turns out it was actually less expensive to get my license. And so I really just started. I got a referral from someone to a flight instructor who was another fascinating, inspiring person. He was a state police officer by day and a flight instructor by night in his own plane. So instead of being kind of the typical school or something with a curriculum that was more formal, he was just someone that really had his own quiet way of teaching and bringing you along. And I really went full bore. I was flying, at least 3 times. We're doing lessons at least 3, maybe 4 times a week, and just became very absorbed in it and pushed through. And in fact, I got my license in 42 hours of flying at that point.
Wow.
And it just kept snowballing from there. The minute I was doing that, I was starting to, try to get how many other people can I tell that this exists?
Yeah, we can get a bit boring like that, can't we, us pilots, singing from the rooftops?
Yes. Yeah. And I've always been a mechanical person and absolutely loved anything that was mechanical. And the fact that really I became very enthralled with airplanes, especially general aviation airplanes, and how that, there's so much to them and yet they're so simple. And I decided that, someday it would be incredible to own an airplane. And it's the same type of thing. You find people who become mentors in life just by meeting them at the airport or just by talking to someone who happens to own a plane or something like that. And it's very infectious. And I was very, very fortunate to come in contact with some individuals who also had that message of, oh, this is something you can do. Like, don't spend your time on spreadsheets crunching numbers and thinking about it. Spend your time figuring out how to make it happen.
Yeah.
And so literally went from there into kind of watching and drooling at different aircraft types to owning my first airplane and moving on from there. I think I went from, I purchased my first plane literally the day before I got married.
Your future wife wouldn't be able to veto it. That's shrewd.
Yeah, it was a very well thought out move that I would make sure that I purchased my first plane, especially now it's my future ex-wife. So moving forward.
Yeah, let's skip over that, shall we?
Yes, exactly. So we moved from that point, seriously, went out and literally closed the deal and got my first airplane the day before. And that's where this incredible excitement began, and got so involved in learning about it that next thing I knew, it was a 1975 Grumman Traveler that I had purchased at the time.
Yeah. And
became kind of so interested in improving it and working on it and becoming part of that community that before I knew it, some people had pushed me from behind as just being the first person in front of the line. And all of a sudden I was the technical director of the American Yankee Association worldwide. Fabulous. Yeah.
It's funny that everyone else steps back and you're the guy at the front, right?
Exactly. So here's someone who, put in perspective, within only a handful of years, went from thinking that aviation as a whole was completely inaccessible and either for the professional and career-minded only or for the wealthy. And somehow, through the inspiration of others, I got slingshotted through getting my license and then all of a sudden getting an airplane, and then moving from that point to being the technical director of the owners association for that aircraft with literally within a handful of years. And I was learning as fast as I possibly could. So there was no genius involved with any of this.
Okay. Well, let's pause that there. Let's jump back just to your training for a minute. We'll pick up with your aircraft ownership and the new technical director worldwide for your aircraft type. Let's go back to your training. So just go back, if you remember back to your instructor, police officer, what was one of your biggest challenges that you had during your PPL training? And how did you overcome that challenge? This is for the benefit of someone sitting on the fence, having their own challenges now, or thinking about, shall I learn to fly? Or just like what you said there, there's the financial challenges for the rich and wealthy, but there's also some people thinking, am I smart enough to be a pilot? Do I have the aptitude, the physical attributes to be a pilot? Think about that.
Yeah, you bring up some very, very excellent points. And when I go back to that training, and in fact, I'm living some of that over again because my 15-year-old son, Jake, right now is just beginning his flight training, and I'm seeing that.
Oh, congratulations.
And yeah, it's that in itself is kind of, breathtaking. It was only the other night I was literally flying over and then listening to my own 15-year-old on the radio on another airplane that I said, "Okay, you can die now. You've reached your goal."
Wow.
Yeah. But going back to your question, there's a couple things I think. One is an issue of confidence, and I think that flying is something that when we all do it, we're never going to have the answer to absolutely everything, and not everything is going to be on a checklist and get through everything. But it's really about a mindset, and that mindset is a level of confidence that you can think something through and you can solve whatever issue might come up.
Yeah.
And that's an important thing to keep in mind because it's critical to being able to solve major problems when they happen. I was fortunate that my instructor was the type of person who believed in letting you kind of get yourself into trouble, but not enough to be in trouble, if that makes sense.
It does. I've heard that a few times, actually, with other pilots and anecdotally anyway.
It's an incredibly important concept because that's what we learn from, right, as pilots. It's the collection of things that didn't kill us, but made us stronger and keep us out of trouble in the future, that give us respect for the aircraft and give us respect for the dangers involved. But it takes an instructor that is comfortable letting you see some of these things for yourself. I remember one night I was flying early on, and night flying really threw me a bit. It was so, early on in training due to the winter when I was learning. And I remember doing touch and goes at an airport and this was in the instructor's 172. And we're going down and I'm trying to, going to rotate and the plane is not climbing. And I see the end of the runway coming and the plane is not climbing. And I keep trying different things and it's still not climbing. And in the most calm way, as I thought in my memory, that the end of the runway was a mere feet away, my instructor simply turned his head to me and said, "So, you going to lift the flaps at any point?" And these are the things that stick with us.
I love hearing those stories because you always get that cool, calm instructor. You do get the panicking ones as well, but I like that guy. Your guy was a good guy.
He really was, and he did that in many ways. And that it really taught me a lot, not just about you have to lift the flaps in a 172 if you ever want to fly, but actually about that concept that when something is not working out the right way, how you stop, how you go through and figure things out, and that there is a solution and you're capable of doing it.
I like that as well, especially because one, it shows we're all human, right? And it shows that instructor had a lot of confidence in his own ability. He really knew the aircraft. He knew what it was capable of. He knew that you just had to flick that switch up, raise the flaps, and you would take off. You weren't in danger, but he showed you that he had time to think. There was a solution to your impending doom at the end of the feet away at the end of the runway. So yeah, I love that.
Exactly. And I think another part of that is that those types of instructors, and also if you can internalize that concept as a student, those are the best learning moments of the entire experience, not them telling you exactly what to do to make a perfect S turn or a turn around a point or do a stall exactly right. the ones that you really learn from are the ones that I'm telling you stories about right now.
Yeah.
And so therefore, when those things happen, they're not failures. They're really wonderful opportunities where you're going to learn something you're never going to forget again. And in fact, I had been flying for maybe 1,000 hours, and I was flying with my family in instrument conditions in the Bonanza. And I remember having one of those things happen to me. I was getting vectored all over the place, and lots of instructions and things happening during a climb out from air traffic control, which had me as a single pilot really busy, completely solid instrument conditions. And somewhere in this, I started to get a feeling that something was wrong. And the same concept of, okay, instead of a panic or ignoring it or anything else, I all of a sudden looked down and started to realize that I was near stall speed. And the reason was that even though I wasn't getting bumped around, just due to the weather we were in, I was in a very significant downdraft and didn't realize it. I was used to, there was so many different things going on. I was used to it had a 300 horsepower engine and power was not an issue. And so not being bumped around, thinking you're doing the right things, thinking you have the right attitude, but simply thinking, oh, well, I can always climb at, 800 feet a minute if I want to, or 1,000 feet a minute. And then all of a sudden realizing that that chirp was a stall warning. It's those experiences of the instructor leaning over and saying, so you going to lift your flaps up, or we going to keep going like this? Yeah. That allow me to recover from something like that and look back at it and say, that's something that I learned from that will never happen again.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Especially you mentioned about aircraft complacency. You're in a Bonanza. This is the Rolls Royce of the single engine pistons. And, I've got 300 horsepower. I can climb anytime. But, having that complacency, if you were in a spam can 152, you might be thinking this thing's going to kill me, or a Tomahawk or whatever, one of those older aircraft. You may be a bit more on your seat of your pants, but there you were sitting, as one of our guests said, fat, dumb and happy. And yeah, there is that complacency, but you definitely, like you said, you've learned from that, and I think that's a great lesson. You mentioned that your son is learning to fly, and obviously you're a father and a pilot. And so what kind of advice have you given your son, or have you just left it into the instructor gods to help your son on in this way?
Well, no, I can't keep my mouth shut in terms of giving him advice. So certainly I don't helicopter him, but yeah, I certainly have given him advice. And a lot of it has been to learn through the experiences that we've had together and pass along stories such as this. I think most recently it has to do with choosing an instructor that meets your personality and paying very close attention to what you're doing. But really a focus that's kind of close to what we just said, which is not, pilots are perfectionists by nature, I think, and not to get caught up in a misstep being a failure.
Yeah.
But instead to view it as a really great opportunity. Because that's probably the biggest thing that has come up in our conversations has been, oh, well, Dad, I did this, or I did this wrong, or I keep landing left to center line or looking at the wrong way. Of course, he's probably got 150 hours flying, but in the right seat, and so he doesn't know how to land in the left seat.
Yeah, exactly. Fabulous. Okay, so let's just jump into aircraft types now. So how many aircraft types have you flown, and what aircraft do you hold the closest to your heart, and why? And maybe we'll jump into some of those reasons why in your journey as well.
So that's an excellent question. And believe it or not, before we talked about having discussion today, I hadn't actually gone back and counted. And so I went and did that homework. So you can credit yourself for doing that. And it was somewhere just north of 40 aircraft types.
Okay.
And, it is awfully hard to go among that and really pick and say, here's a favorite, just because I was so in love with my first plane of a Grumman and how light and beautiful that was on the controls. I'm equally in love with the feel and the solidity and the control harmony of the Bonanza. But aircraft are wonderful things, and it's hard to go and pick that out. But I would have to say that the most exciting one, even though there are more interesting and unique ones out there, the most exciting one is the Titan T-51 Mustang, the kit-built 3/4 scale Mustang that we're currently building. And I recently had an opportunity to fly it, and it was just breathtaking.
Fabulous. I'm interested to find out about that in your story. So you had an opportunity to fly before you buy and build, right?
That is correct.
Excellent. Okay, I'm really excited about that. Okay, so let's jump back into your journey. Hopefully that T-51 is going to jump in there at some point towards the end. But let's jump back to where we were. So you're now the owner of a 1975 Grumman Traveller. You've got your PPL. You're really excited. You're now the president of the owners club?
I was the technical director of the owners club.
The technical director of the owners club. So what happened next? Take us on your journey.
One of the things that's another theme that's been of my experience so far is in order to afford to do these things, you have to find a way to afford to do these things.
Yeah.
And in my case, sometimes it's get the plane first and do the rest second. And that was the same. That was true with the Grumman. I quickly actually started creating and selling things that had to do with the plane. I started doing leather interior work and shipping things back and forth having to do with that. And then I also created a modification that I got certified through the FAA that increased the performance of the aircraft. And these were all by the bootstraps, didn't know what I was doing, learning experiences.
You said you had a sort of mechanical background. So was this the first time you've actually worked on an aircraft? Is this all new stuff to you?
Yes, absolutely no experience in these areas. My background certainly gave me mechanical experience. I was an engineer by trade in my training and my college education, but nothing having to do with aviation. And so literally, like you take something like change to the aircraft, I had seen a Mooney, and 1 year the Mooney E-Series aircraft was designed with a little door that bypassed the air filter and provided some ram air for kind of a cheap man's turbo, a little bit of pressurized air from the aircraft going through and bypass the air filter, and the Mooney goes a little bit faster. And I thought, I should do that for a Grumman. Well, I don't know anything about what's involved. Absolutely nothing. It literally is time to start reading things. What does it take to get something certified? And I think, again, I was fortunate that when I approached the folks from the FAA, I don't know whether they just took pity on me or thought like, oh my God, he knows so little. I knew what I was doing with the development, and I knew what I was doing with that, but I did not know what I was doing with the regulations and how to get it through. And somehow they took pity on me enough to give me some guidance and enough to be reasonable in the way that they responded to things that, of course, it took a very long time. But in the end, I received that certificate saying, hey, you're done. You have the ability to produce this, to create this.
Wow. So sometimes it definitely does pay to be the new guy, right? So you can really ask those questions which no one else would dare ask, right? And having that innocence about it. And obviously it paid off for you. Wow.
I was very fortunate. And I think that's the case, obviously, with many of the folks that you talk to, that sometimes you come across the right people. I'm not going to pretend that everybody, obviously, is there to help you when you start working with a government office. But I was fortunate, and I also it followed. So, for example, even after I had that and finally had this legal modification to the aircraft, I didn't know at the time that that's great. But if you want to actually make something to this approval and sell it, that's a completely different part of the Federal Aviation Administration.
Naturally.
That's the part that has to do with manufacturing.
Okay.
So now you have to go and start meeting with those folks. And so it really, really was quite funny, because literally I had the equivalent of a closet in my house that on the door was marked FAA manufacturing facility. And that's where the parts got inspected and everything else. And that became a certified FAA manufacturing facility, which it is to this day in my house.
Wow.
And the FAA makes an annual visit to inspect the manufacturing facility, and they get a chuckle out of that.
Wow. Okay. So in a nutshell, could you just describe what the process is to make a change on an aircraft, high level?
Yeah, well, it involves both those different sides of it. So you start with something called a supplemental type certificate. And that is the aircraft is certified in a certain way, and that becomes its type certificate. And if you want to make a modification to that aircraft, then you have to get approved something similar that then is essentially a supplement to what the manufacturer did. And they view it the same way. And so you can go online and you find out what regulations apply to this thing that you want to do. Let's assume that you first go, and let's assume the very easy part is whatever you want to do to an airplane, you've already designed it and it's done.
Yeah.
Could be something as simple as a cup holder. So you figured out the new cup holder. Well, now the FAA doesn't do it for you. It's your job to go and figure out, out of all these thousands of regulations that have been written over the years, which ones apply to this. And you make your case to them. These are all the regulations that apply to this thing that I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And here is why I comply with all of them. And here's all the data behind it. And if you do as much homework as you can up front, make it as clean a case as possible, then you may be fortunate. And as I did, you may, spend months only relocating where the signature location is going to be on the front page or something like that.
Is it like that? Yeah.
That's a real thing that actually happened, by the way.
Wow. So you spend your time putting everything on a plate to make it as easy for them to accept it as possible.
Exactly. And then they can spend their time locating different things.
Okay.
But it really is not the end of the world. But I think, again, going back, the bigger message is that there are interesting ways to make things happen. And I did that with the Grumman. And then we outgrew that. We got to the point we were taking two boys on family trips in a 4-seat airplane all over the place with luggage and everything. And of course, we were constantly right, 0.1 gram below maximum takeoff weight.
Yeah.
And it became time to look at something else. And the same process ensued. Aircraft values were down at the time, which was very fortunate for me. And I decided that, it was time to look at my absolute dream aircraft. And that was the Bonanza A36.
No, likewise. Yeah, that's up there on my list as well.
Yeah, I remember seeing one years and years ago and thinking, wow, like that's the ultimate. I don't think I can't ever imagine owning one myself, but I was just drooling over it and the space and everything else that goes along with it. But, I ended up finding one that looked like a desperately neglected, orphaned airplane. Yeah. But had almost a brand new engine in it and brand new avionics. And everything else looked like, you would never want to put a passenger in it because they would run away.
Yeah.
And that worked out to my favor because I was able to afford it to get it and then started again in creating products so I could afford to keep it.
Go on, break us down then. What products did you create for the Bonanza? It's
interesting because, aircraft evolve. They start with low horsepower. They start without a lot of features in the first model years that they always come out. And then they improve and improve and improve, usually without changing much about the overall airplane. And when the first 10 years that the A36 was made, you had this beautiful 6-seat aircraft, but you had absolutely no place to put bags. So you would put people in there and say, this is great, this is really exciting. And then they'd say, here's your luggage to go on your lap.
Yeah.
And beginning in 1979, they expanded the aircraft into the tail cone and created a baggage compartment. And so I set about to create a modification for all of the older aircraft to add baggage. And I was very fortunate to be able to get through that process. It was long and painful, but I got through that. And to this day, I manufacture and sell modifications to the beach aircraft, the 36s, to add baggage space and make it possible to make the older aircraft as useful as the newer aircraft. And that has paid for the airplane.
Fabulous. Wow. And at what point I guess with the older aircraft, but do the manufacturers ever get involved with STCs and anyone else creating modifications for do they pay an interest? Obviously, you're changing their beautiful design from the beginning. So,
yeah, you would think that they would, but my experience has been that in most cases they don't. It depends on what it is. It has to be something applicable to the currently shipping model.
Yeah.
They generally don't care what anyone's doing with the older ones. But what's fascinating is that the manufacturers are held to the same types of rigorous standards that, of course, anyone else would be. And that's why it's so difficult to see change happen, even from model year to model year of new aircraft. They just don't change shape. I mean, a new airplane comes out and it's like, oh, what do we have now? Well, different color seats and a different color propeller.
Yeah, exactly.
And what's fascinating is if you look at new news that comes out of manufacturers where they say we now offer a 3-bladed prop or we now offer wingtips or something different, very often they're actually STCs. And they're actually buying them from outside companies who have done that certification of that modification and incorporating it into their new model year plane. And so it's a fascinating process. I've visited several aircraft manufacturers, and they're really amazing places to visit. And you see that they have to finish the airplane in many cases and technically deliver it, and then roll it into another hangar, take it apart, and put on these new changes.
Yeah, because I think I'm quite a fan of the King Airs, and I know, like, even the new King Airs or the 90 GTX or whatever it's called, it comes with bag lockers and also other bits and bobs, which I think is done by another company. I believe
that's exactly correct.
Yeah.
You're exactly correct, because it costs too much for the manufacturer to go back and make that investment in getting those things certified. So they actually have to deliver the plane without it and then roll it into a shop and take whatever needs to be taken back apart. And that is also true of the TBMs. When they went to like the 900 and 930, they're all companies that have come out with those things that often apply to older aircraft, which is good for the rest of us.
Wow. Every aircraft you've mentioned so far is on my dream list. So yeah, you did a good job. So I'm loving what you're doing there. You've got your aircraft, your dream aircraft, you're selling stuff, which is actually paid for that aircraft, which is absolutely genius in my eyes. Could you give us an example of the type of flying that you actually did as a family in your Beechcraft?
Yeah, I think the United States is a fairly large country and it's extremely diverse. And so we made it a point to try to take a couple-week trip every year and go to different state parks and go kind of around the United States. And it really is amazing because you can only plan so much. And maybe nowadays, the internet gives you everything. You plan an awful lot. But certainly at the time that I was doing most of it, you looked where the cheap gas prices were. You looked where there looked like there was a hotel or somewhere cool to go. And those were your stops.
Yeah.
And it's the people along the way that you meet and the things that happen that are really, really amazing. And in fact, if we, going back in time, I remember taking a trip in the Grumman where there was a stop that I had planned just because of inexpensive gas and looked like there was a town to have an overnight that was in the upper hand of Michigan, northern United States, near the Great Lakes. And as I'm coming in there, all I see is a cornfield with a strip in it. And I'm thinking, well, I guess it's paved. It looks like the specs, and the GPS says this is it.
You're here.
Exactly, you're here. And so we landed, we deplaned. A really great guy came out with a pickup truck and took all our stuff to take us into town. Well, he takes us into town, and the town is basically a reproduction of an old Bavarian village, complete with glockenspiel and beer gardens and all these things.
Wow. And beer?
I mean, yeah, like, okay, so I literally looked at the rest of my family and said, so we crashed because this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. we're in some crazy place, but yeah. Wow. Do you remember what that place is called?
It'll come to me,
Yeah.
but I'll have to remember that. But turns out it was basically just a town that was a tourist stop for summers in Upper Michigan.
Okay.
And a fascinating thing. And those are the types of places that you stop at. Another time, we literally wanted to go and see the National Football League Hall of Fame as a quick stop.
Yeah.
And we didn't look at the calendar and we didn't realize it. And then all of a sudden, when we get there, it turns out that it's Hall of Fame induction day and all these things, and we met a bunch. Things just happen. They just materialize when you fly a plane and when you expand your horizons.
And they're the best, aren't they? The non-planned things, just have we are going away for a couple of weeks with the family. Let's fly and see what happens. I love that.
Yeah, and I would really encourage everyone to do that. I think it's very easy with the cost of flying, and especially for most people that rent and things like that. It's very easy to think of an airplane still as kind of a local vehicle and to go places that are within an hour or two.
Yeah.
But it really is, kind of life-changing to spend as much time as possible of your flying trying to do things that expand your envelope dramatically, that go on trips that are days instead of hours, and that go places beyond your area of comfort, because then you really start knowing what it's like to be out of your comfort zone, learning where it's sea level where I live. But had I not flown on these trips, I would not have had to learn about what's involved with high altitude flying and canyon flying and all of these types of things, and experience these types of things. Just never would have happened.
Fabulous. You mentioned a couple of things there in terms of your flying capacity. So you are a instrument rated pilot, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. What was the decision? Was that just a no-brainer to get your instrument rating due to just capacity and the type of flying you wanted to do? What was the decision-making process to get your IR?
Well, I think the decision-making process to get it was based on a combination of need, because of the weather in New England. Just you're going to lose so many flying days if you can't. And then also the experience I had, again, flying with pilots who were instrument rated and seeing what's involved. And, by that point in time, I had maybe 800 hours of flying time, and I was just getting into that complacent zone in a simple airplane like the Grumman. And all of a sudden, having those experiences flying instruments with other pilots, I found myself intimidated by it. And I can't even understand half of what's happening right now. And that made me have the reaction. My first reaction was to be intimidated by it. And my second reaction was, it's time to move forward. It's time to get that. This is far too important of a skill to have. I think that there are ratings and experiences and things you can do that just add to your resume, but instrument flying is something that clearly has the skills that can save your life.
Yeah. And
radically changes your flying, what it means and what it's like and how you operate the aircraft. And so it was by far more difficult for me than getting my primary license.
Fabulous. Wow. I think that's a sort of common theme. I like hearing pilots' sort of views, why they got their IR. I'm sort of dabbling with the idea myself. So yeah, thank you for that. That's a great explanation. So in terms of the STCs and the bits and bobs, is this all under the umbrella of Approach Aviation?
Yes, it is. And most recently we came out with another product called the FlexAlert multifunction annunciator. And that similar type of situation where in that case, there are, I believe the statistic is something like 30 gear-up landings just in the United States alone per year. I think that's from an old study. But in the Bonanza that I fly, the gear lights are down by the co-pilot's knees.
Yeah.
So when you go back into the 1970s, the concept of human factors engineering and where you put something on the panel must have come out of a drunken bar fight or something, because some of these panels are really unique.
They're crazy, aren't they? Yeah, especially the older ones. Wow.
Yeah, so it's like, if you want to know if your gear's down, just slide your head down sideways and look to the right and turn your head sideways. And that plus many other things really motivated me to come up with something consolidated that would go in front of the pilot and be fairly inexpensive, that would give you all of your situations if there was something wrong with the engine, oil pressure, vacuum, not just retractable gear aircraft, but fixed gear aircraft too. And so that's our most recent product, is a very, very eloquent little device that if someone's doing panel work, then they can put on and no longer have independent lights for all those different things, but let us tell everyone what the status is of their aircraft, just like the big boys have. All large aircraft have something like this, but we want to make it available all the way down to Cubs.
Fabulous. So, like with most things, you mentioned one good reason why you developed this product, whether the gear is down or whatever. And so, most designs or come as a solution to a problem. So what other problems did you see? Was it just about pilot awareness? Where was your inspiration?
Well, it goes back in some cases to things like, having vacuum failures in the past that I've had, or other situations. And again, at the time that I came up with the idea for this need, I was having some panel work done to upgrade to some new avionics. And so much of the design of what we had to do was, you put there's beautiful glass you can get now. There's all sorts of these great expensive avionics out there. And yet, when you're done deciding what you're going to choose for your panel, you're left with, okay, now where are we going to put these 4 ugly post lights or lights that have, that tell you, where are you going to put the one that tells you your baggage door is open, or where are you going to put the one that tells you your vacuum's failed, or your starter is still engaged while you're taxiing out? And there's no solution to that. And so that need, and seeing how many people were making these almost absurdly monumental investments in their panel, followed by duct taping on little lights for all of the different annunciations, plus those concerns and the fact that I had witnessed a gear up happen right in front of me, really, really drove me to say, there's a need for something that's very inexpensive, that it looks eloquent, and we can stick right into the panel when someone's doing this work.
Wow. So in terms of the uniqueness of this product, is there anything else out there like this, or is this, groundbreaking?
Well, I'm not someone to say that anything I do is groundbreaking, but if I had seen something out there, I probably wouldn't have invested the time and energy to do it. But, we're very happy with the result.
And have you had, what kind of feedback have you had from pilots and owners?
Oh, we've had really, really good feedback. Very, very happy about that.
Okay, well, what I'll do is I'll definitely include a link to and a picture. If you have a look at your website, it definitely does look very small. It looks like you could put it literally anywhere. Like you say, you've got all these glass panels everywhere. So you'll definitely be able to find a place in a prominent position for this. So I'll definitely give a link and a brief description of what it is on your show notes as well.
Thank you.
Also, I mentioned in the bio, you are the creator and founder of SocialFlight. Could you give us an introduction about SocialFlight and what is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. And if I go back to the beginning, we talked about, the inspiration. And that's what obviously your show is all about, which is so wonderful. And I started that need to pass on the things that people had done for me, the people that had helped me out. And I started that back in 2000 when I created a video series on getting people to, what you could do for your own maintenance on aircraft, called the Educated Owner Video Series. Just teaching, just passing along all of that. And that got me very interested in the social aspect and what can we do to support general aviation as a whole. And I was very fortunate because after I did the video series, I was asked to become a writer for AOPA, the Aircraft Owner and Pilots Association. I still write their online maintenance column for them. And that gave me even more insight into kind of what's happening worldwide with our community. And there's so much talk about what can we do to help and what can we do to create more pilots and get people flying more. And I did spend a lot of time thinking about it. And the conclusion that I came to, that was something I could do that was unique compared to what had been done in the past, was this idea to focus on events, to focus on the things that connect people in person. And I looked around and I said, okay, so there's some calendars and there's some things out there, but ultimately, pilots need a mission. It's too easy with the cost of flying and all the other things that pull on us to stay home instead of go fly. unless we have a mission.
Yeah.
And almost every pilot, if you said to them, hey, if there's an antique World War II aircraft fly-in happening 50 miles from you on Saturday at 10 a.m. and it's a beautiful day, are you going to go? Then they'd say, yeah, I'm going to fly. Forget about whatever else is going on. If that's happening, I'll go.
Yeah.
And so it became my mission to catalog all of those events, everything happening, and to create a free app and website that puts all of that in front of people and then sends a weekly email to everyone that says, hey, this is what's happening in your backyard, and really push that. And it's open to everyone. It is largely populated with data for the United States and Canada. There's some in Australia, but this is something that I know you have a worldwide reach of this program, rightly so. And for anyone who's listening, this is something you can do for your own organization in your own community in whatever country that you live. We have airports around the world, and all you need to do is go on and add a plus sign and put your event there and use it for your own local club, chapter, or anything. And it helps get people together and really helps support a lot of these local clubs. And so we found out very quickly that people, I got a lot of feedback from organizations that had local chapters and clubs, et cetera, that had said, hey, all of a sudden, where we used to photocopy and invite and pretty much only invite the people who already knew about us, all of a sudden last weekend, our pancake breakfast had twice as many people.
Fabulous. Yeah.
Which is exactly what we all want. I mean, that's the inspiration. That's what we all want. We all want to bring people in from inside, from outside, and from all over, and increase attendance and increase energy for all of these things. And the most touching and important thing I ever got was a letter from a gentleman from Washington State, northwest corner of the U.S., that said, I want to let you know that I decided not to sell my airplane because of SocialFlight.
Wow. That's what you call a testimonial.
It really is.
Yeah.
He said, I wasn't flying, I just was flying less and less. And a friend turned me on to this, and I started getting the weekly email. I started seeing these things going on. So, pilots fly alone a lot. And so all of a sudden he was flying places, and then you end up looking at the same cool plane standing next to someone else, and you strike up a conversation, and one thing leads to another, and you have this wonderful social activity, and the energy flows back in. And he was flying more, and he said, you know what, no way, I'm not going to sell it. And if I can do that just once in my life, that's just a wonderful wonderful thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think just looking at the app, downloaded it myself, and just there's a lot of stuff going on. I can see where it's branched out to other countries. But yeah, maybe we can get a few more plus signs in some different countries. That would be fantastic. Yeah,
it just helps everyone. And that led to our latest thing, of course, which you touched on, which is the Titan T51 Mustang, which is a similar concept. And that is same kind of thing. I could not imagine affording to build a kit plane or a Titan, but it is something I wanted to do with my boys, especially before they get old enough to go off to school or something like that. And I thought, what are the other things that draw people together in aviation? Well, they're stories, and they're participating, they're watching something happen, something really exciting and dramatic. And so as part of this kind of social flight community, I went to all of the partners that help us, that advertise with us, that do things to help keep SocialFlight's lights on, and also to the Titan Aircraft Company, and said, look, you work with us, we'll work with you. And I had gotten an opportunity to fly in this thing, this 3/4 scale, P-51 Mustang, and was just blown away. The grin took about 6 months before it started to fade, and by then I got another flight.
I'm listening, I'm grinning.
Yeah. and so I thought, okay, like I said, this isn't something I can afford to do in traditional means. And so we got the companies, we talked to all the companies, we talked to Titan, and we decided that we're doing this joint project of building this aircraft, and we're doing it in our house. And literally, and you can only do this in a house that only has boys. I'll put that one. I don't want to offend anyone, but to take apart a dining room and a living room and put anything down. Perhaps you could do it in other ways, but it was much easier, let's at least say, in a house that only had boys.
I think it's a case. I think it's a case of it can only be done in a house full of boys and with an FAA maintenance facility wardrobe as well. So I think you're good. Well, yeah. What's with the keep the coffees off the wings and stuff like that? What do you know? It's crazy.
Exactly. Well, we said, well, what's the best way to keep your kids from watching television at all for the next 3 years? Put an airplane in the house. And literally 2 weeks ago, the kit arrived. I drove it back from Titan's factory in Austinburg, Ohio, and started putting these things literally in the house. And it's going to be really funny and entertaining. And we're documenting the entire thing on SocialFlight-T51.com.
SocialFlight-T51.com. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, I'll make sure that's linked to the show notes because I definitely want to see this in your living room.
Yes, it is. It is going to be a really, really fun thing. We have a lot planned, and that includes at a lot of the major shows, such as Inventor, Oshkosh, Wisconsin in the United States, and also at Sun and Fun, and perhaps some of the other shows around the world. Our partners are actually going to be doing contests that will be giving away rides in the factories. Finished T51 Mustang. So people will actually be able to compete and get rides. It is everyone's dream is, of course, something similar to a P51 Mustang, and to see it in your living room it puts a grin on your face.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Like the lady, the beautiful lady in the United States is the T51 Mustang. In the UK and Australia, Canada, even the Spitfire may get it, put its nose ahead, but they're up there, aren't they? Both of them as breaking people's hearts.
I'll take either one any day.
Fabulous. So just for those who don't know much about the Titan T51, just break down the numbers for us about the aircraft, engine, and give us some geeky knowledge about it.
Absolutely. Well, it's a 3/4 scale, 2-seat aircraft. It is a spot-on replica of the P51 Mustang in just about every aspect. And this particular one is powered by, or will be powered by, a General Motors LS3 Corvette engine, which produces 430 horsepower, derated to 400 horsepower. The Titan factory actually is part of Whirlwind Propeller. They make the propeller as well. And it is an incredible aircraft to fly. Flies about 200 miles per hour at its peak, fully aerobatic. And it's a very, very unique design, too, that the folks at Titan came up with. You have Titan is run by John Williams and 𝗘𝗽𝗀𝗃. He's the owner, and 𝗘𝗽𝗃 is general manager. And they are fascinating individuals that have created this airplane. And it is a tube structure that then is basically bonded to an aluminum monocoque structure around it. It's a very, very interesting design that makes it incredibly strong. And what's also nice about that is that when it shows up to the beginning of your build, instead of a big pile of flat sheet metal and you kind of trying to convince skeptical people that someday this will look something like an airplane.
Yeah.
You actually start with a frame that has some seats. So day one, you can get in and make airplane noises.
Fabulous. Excellent. So it's like, in terms of 1 to 10, how difficult is this? Is this something which you, with your mechanical background and obviously lots of other aviation sort of hands-on experience, is this something that average Joe could do? Or is this, what do you need? What experience would you need?
I think the answer is yes, that the average person can do it. I have never built an airplane before, and I got my airframe and power plant mechanics licenses and my IA, my inspection, by working with other mechanics for experience. And I didn't go to a school with that. And so I'm by no means a genius on any of these things. I don't have a metal shop. This is a kit that's meant for people to be able to work their way through with a really wonderful amount of support from Titan and from John and Bill. And, I think they've sold well over 200 of these kits worldwide. Many of them are in the UK and Australia and New Zealand. And so I really do think that this is something that anyone can do. It's about just pushing your dream forward and learning by doing. And you can do it even with part of the kit. And that's the key to any of these things. More important than having a flying aircraft to me was the experience, was being able to do this, to be able to share it with my boys, and be able, it's a bucket list thing. And that can be done, I passionately believe, at almost any financial level. You want to start with a tail kit, you can do that for a fraction of the cost of any of it and see what it's like to build a piece.
Yeah, fabulous. It's definitely, sometimes it's not all about the destination, it's about the journey and the process, enjoying the process as opposed to, the final goal. So, wow, that's amazing. And what a bucket list. What else is on that list? Dare I ask?
I don't know. It keeps growing.
Fabulous. Okay, so we've touched on a few things there. We've touched on you've gained your PPL, flew some amazing aircraft, you've got your dream aircraft, well, one of them, and now you've influenced and allowed thousands of people to connect and share flights and stuff. But what is your proudest moment in your flying career so far? Tell us that story, Jeff.
Well, that's an interesting question in terms of like what's the proudest moment. It probably was the first time that I was able to fly my plane legitimately for business. I think that the idea of doing that, of making a trip and making a mission, to me was like kind of having arrived, that this was something it was such a dream to be able to get there. And so that was a really big deal to me when I got involved in that and then started being able to visit clients and fly myself there and have that be like, yeah, I made this happen and I'm on a mission that's not recreational in nature. That really made me quite proud. And then the other part of it was also that during that time, I worked for a couple avionics companies also. And we were early on in the beginning of the pointy tip of the synthetic vision world when avionics were just finally starting to be able to show, the outside world when your windows were white.
Yeah.
In IMC. And that was about the same time a lot of these things were happening. And it was fascinating to be able to do that and then also to be able to experience the changes that synthetic vision was doing for people and the lives it was saving.
Fabulous. Wow. I think, what you mentioned there is a bit scary how closely aligned mine and your goals are. You're a bit further down the line than me, but I'm definitely going to be, you're inspiring me to sort of keep on trucking, as it were. But yeah, flying for the first time with business, having a legitimate, reason why you're flying, having that specific mission that's maybe paid for even, how about that? Amazing. And then obviously being part of a big movement. Yes, with the synthetic vision, that must have been a pretty, I can see why that's up on the top there. Fantastic. Okay. And in terms of, you've done so much, you've got so much, your CV is pretty awesome. And, what are your future plans and aspirations, Jeff?
Well, at this point, I just have to go back to I now realize that the next, not now as in this conversation, but certainly since this kit has arrived, the aspirations that we have right now are to get through this adventure and to see this T-51 Mustang fly. When it comes to flying, that is certainly top of mind and a journey that really hoping to share with all of you throughout this.
Okay, as I said, I'll definitely link the website directly on your show notes as well. Okay, Jeff, this is my favorite part of the show. Welcome to the Quick Fire Checklist. This is where I ask you a series of questions and you come back to us, the inspired pilots, with amazing and inspiring answers. How does that sound? You ready, Jeff?
I am ready.
Okay, let's go. What is the best piece of advice related to flying that you've ever received?
If something seems wrong, it is.
Have you applied that?
So things generally do not heal themselves in aircraft mechanically. And also, as I mentioned before, if you have a sinking feeling, there's something going on. The biggest advice that I can give anyone from my own experience is to trust yourself. If you feel something is amiss, you need to get yourself into a position where you can investigate it. That could mean landing, or that could mean simply going on a specific heading, leveling out the airplane, and getting yourself into a situation where you can direct your attention to whatever it is that could be wrong. And I have, had experiences with both. And I think that sometimes pilots don't realize that taking a time out is available to them. even in an extremely high workload environment, flying and dealing with air traffic control, if they tell you to do something, you as a pilot, in the interest of safety, either can make a decision that's different than that, or you can always ask them that you need time, and can you get a holding vector or something, which is just like head this direction at this altitude and call us back when you have time. And then direct your attention to whatever's going on, because I have, in every case, if you think something's wrong, it usually is.
Fabulous. If something feels wrong, it is. Great piece of advice and some great anecdotes there. Okay, do you have a favorite internet flying resource that you'd like to share with the listeners?
I do. I am a real fan of FlyQ from Seattle Avionics, the electronic flight bag, and it does many other things. I've spent a fair amount of time with the folks over that run that company. And John Rutter and 𝗍𝗶𝗀𝗽𝗃, they're great people, but I've been incredibly impressed by that. And it's very easy, I think, with lots of things in life to get, everyone goes one direction to whoever the biggest player on the block is.
Yeah.
But I really love that product.
Okay, and what kind of features does it have?
Well, for me, it's just very intuitive in terms of like splitting your screen or flight planning or being able to see anything that's going on. But one of the things they came out with recently that's fascinating is something called augmented reality. And that is, they have the ability, you can have the same app you can have on your phone, and you can hold it up and scan it or wherever you're looking. And the camera will take the outside world that you see out your window and then actually show you, call out where the airport is or call out where the VOR is. So literally, it shows you the real picture and then helps you find it by superimposing like a big flag saying, hey, it's here.
Right here. The runway's here. Look.
Yeah, exactly. Whether you believe it or not.
Yeah, I've been there before. Excellent. Wow. I'll link that to you in show notes as well. Can you share one of your personal habits that you find useful and believes contributes to your flying success?
I would say participate in the maintenance of the aircraft that you fly. And that applies even if you don't own an aircraft. If you rent an aircraft like most people, then spend some time, use it as a vacation day to see if there's some time you can spend rolling your sleeves up, even if you don't consider yourself someone mechanically inclined. The opportunity to work alongside a mechanic and do some of the, even the simplest tasks and get to know the airplane that you fly is remarkably valuable to those times that you're flying and something may seem amiss. It's the difference between people who panic when, there's roughness and then or someone else who knows that it has to do with the magneto or something feels strange about a brake. And it takes a lot of experience to be one of those mechanics. It doesn't take a lot of experience to spend enough time around them to just get kind of fairly competent with how the airplanes work. And I think it's important to go beyond checking the oil and looking for birds' nests on a pre-flight. And so that's the advice I would give.
Wow, I think that's a great piece of advice, and I think I'm the bird's nest looking kind of guy, But yeah, I totally agree with that. I think as well with the 50 and the 150 hour checks is you don't have to be fully signed off to do some of the things. So
that's correct. Yeah. There's, as far as the FAA is concerned, there's I believe 34 items that you can do yourself on those airplanes. So there's a lot you can do for yourself, and just having someone show you, even if you don't choose to do it later on, is really educational.
Yeah, absolutely. Great piece of advice, Jeff. Okay, trikes or tail draggers?
Well, I spent my whole career on trikes so far. And if I don't say tail draggers now, I don't think this plane will ever fly.
Fabulous. I was about to say, I knew, you've got the most glorified aviation themed table in your dining room. And
exactly.
Yeah, you better say tail dragger. Okay. Jeff, can you recommend one aviation-related book?
I can. This is definitely going to come out of left field because it's not so much of a kind of a story of someone's regular flying. But there's a book called Speed with Economy, and it's in limited publication, but it's out there, and it's by a gentleman by the name of Kent Passer, Passer. And it's a fascinating story, even if someone isn't incredibly interested in the mechanical aspect. It's a gentleman who built a kit aircraft and then set about the whole process of teaching him, learning himself, and looking at how he could make these constant refinements to increase performance and economy, and what it is that, really gets down to what it really is that causes a difference in the airplanes we fly. We like as pilots to say, well, this one goes this fast or can hold this much, or this is what I burn per hour, and just think of them as statistics. And he really set about to say, my plane's going to be a little example, and I'm going to go through refinement and experiment after experiment through this book. And somehow, from the beginning of his story till the end of his story, he made this radical transformation where this plane wound up something like 25 knots faster on less gas. I mean, like, really crazy improvements.
Yeah.
But it was the story of how he did it and what he tried and what failed and what worked. And I found it fascinating.
It goes back to what we said earlier about, it's the process, the story is the process in this case. Yeah, definitely. I'll try and find that book, Speed with Economy by 𝗘𝗽𝗄𝗃. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it is, it is a story of his thing. And then at the end, what happened and awards that he, won with his, I believe it's called a Mustang too. But really, really, you look at it and you just say how someone could evolve a design to that degree and learn along the way and make it happen is really fascinating.
Fabulous. I'll definitely link that. Okay. I'm interested in what you say here, Jeff. What is your favorite non-essential but essential to you technology gadget in your cockpit?
That's probably going to be the FlyQ. That's probably the two. I mean, if we go back to internet, maybe I would substitute SocialFlight, of course, to get people flying. But I probably, if there's one thing, when I forget my iPad, that's always causing me to have to learn new things about my avionics.
Fabulous. Okay, so we got FlyQ. So give me one other app that's on your iPad related to flying.
Let's see. Good question. It's probably there's a US AirNet weather app that I use that has a really interesting depictions of NOAA weather and cloud heights and things like that I tend to use.
Yeah, so good stuff for the IR rated pilot.
Yes.
Okay, if you had a time machine and could go back in time and meet your younger self, just as you were about to start your flying journey, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself? You've probably given this to your son already, but I'd like to hear what you have to say.
My advice would be have faith. There is logic to a seemingly crooked path. I have gone many, many different directions in my life, many different careers and things that seemed wandering in nature and very disconnected. And it's only more recently that I've seen that it all adds up to make sense. It all adds the right tools. And I've heard interviews that you've done with remarkable individuals who may have gone in very different directions. And in the end, it's that collection that actually does make sense. And so I think it's a matter of faith to have it in yourself and to be comfortable if you're not sure where you're really going.
Fabulous. No, I totally agree there. I was like yourself, you've, like you said, many careers, industries you've sort of touched on, and the way that everything has just all fallen into place now is where you're meant to be and where you are. So I totally believe in the faith process there.
Yeah, every one of them, a success. And so it does take that to have comfort in it.
Okay. Inspired Pilots, you can find all the links to all the resources and everything else in today's episode with Jeff by going to inspiredpilot.com and search for Jeff in the search bar to find the show notes. Okay, Jeff, listening to your journey, the stories you've shared, like I said, I love the way you sort of literally fell into aviation. You overcome various hurdles. Yeah, I love the way you say, I might take this on board myself by get the aircraft, then learn how to pay for it and fly it, etc. That might be the way forward there. But, like you said, you've inspired me on a lot of levels. I love the way our sort of bucket list things and items and aircraft are all the same ones that I'm interested in as well. So can you give the audience of the Inspired Pilots one last piece of guidance and then share how people can get in contact with you, and then we'll sign off?
Well, I think that the last piece of guidance is to seek out those individuals that help you get to your goals, that help you achieve things in life. it is possible to make your dreams happen, really. It sounds cheesy, but even if you don't have the means directly to do it on a traditional path, it is possible to do that. And none of the things that I've talked about in my career would ever have happened just on my own, without any doubt. My closest friend, 𝗂𝗶𝗹𝗰𝘆, who lives on an air park and has built kit foxes in the past, has inspired and helped me along the way. There have been many individuals, some with us, some no longer with us, throughout this entire thing. SocialFlight itself wouldn't exist without Paul and Jason Clemens and Matt Cardillo and a bunch of other folks. All of these things of achieving your dreams, and again, the T-51 without John Williams and Bill Colino wouldn't happen. And so I think that we are ultimately a social community, and we all share a passion, and that's what brings us together, to inspire each other and to help each other do it. I'm here to help anyone at any time, and I think that's the message: is you can do it. Seek out the people to help.
What's the best way that people can get in contact with you?
You can reach me at jeff@approachaviation.com, or just through SocialFlight, just socialflight.com, and our build is socialflight-t51.com. But all of those, either one of those, SocialFlight probably is the best way, and they'll all reach me.
Fabulous. Okay, I'll make sure every single method to get in contact with be on your show notes. Okay, Jeff, thank you for joining us on the show and for your time today. You've been very generous. On behalf of the Inspired Pilots, I'd like to say thank you and speak to you again.
Thank you very much. Take care, Marvin.
Thank you for joining me today for episode 28 of the Inspired Pilot podcast. Well, what a great way to get the podcast rolling and back into the air in 2018 by speaking with Jeff today. He's definitely a great guy and a real deal, inspirational aviation go-getter. Jeff is definitely all in this aviation space, educating pilots and selling tools to empower aircraft owners by giving them the knowledge and the skills to do basic maintenance tasks and to understand more about the aircraft that they actually flying in. That's definitely a good thing, right? Even if you don't actually want to get your hands dirty, having a deeper understanding of what is actually going on up front, more than what's taught in the PPL aircraft tech exam is definitely the way forward. And I've actually challenged myself to learn more after this conversation with Jeff. What I really like is Jeff's story further compounds a common theme that I've picked up amongst many of the previous guests on the show, in that, if you want something bad enough, you can actually make this your reality. It is within your power. And yes, it may take longer for some people based on circumstances, but the opportunity is actually there. You just need to grab it. He also shared the importance of one-to-one relationships and how meeting, the right people along the way can often enable amazing opportunities. So that's definitely something to think about for everybody. Personally, I think buy the aircraft first and then figure out how to pay for it is going to be my mantra for 2018. So I'll see how that goes. And if upgrading your favorite aircraft with new equipment and safety gadgets isn't enough, Jeff is also bringing pilots together by putting the social in flight with the SocialFlight website app and the fascinating Titan T51 build project he's completing with his sons. The Titan T51 looks awesome and sounds like the real deal, so I'll definitely be following along with this journey. Okay, you can find the show notes for Jeff's episode, which includes all the links mentioned, by heading over to the show's website, inspiredpilot.com. Don't forget you can also leave a comment for Jeff directly on the page and find other recommended aviation resources, so definitely go check out inspiredpilot.com. I really appreciate receiving feedback about the show, so do get in touch. I reply to every single email, and you can find me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. I'm really excited about the podcast this year, so don't forget to subscribe so you are notified when a new episode is released. And if you do like the show, I'll be really, really, really grateful if you share it with one colleague, friend or fellow av geeks. And if you do have 5 minutes, please leave a rating and review on iTunes with as many stars as possible, as this helps increase the show's exposure and therefore getting the journeys of our featured inspiring pilots in front of and inspiring more people, which, as I always say, is the whole mission of the podcast. Okay, that's it for now, and don't forget, wherever you are in your pilot journey, get ready to be inspired.